He's supervising. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivarikacharya Astatarasatasi Simadis Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Premanandi. Very different weather, different place, different. You live here. I'm just like, I haven't been here in a long time. Very different. A section of the Srimad Bhagavatam that I've been discussing for quite some time, following the Brahma Vimohan Leela. Do you know what the Brahmi Vimohan Leela is? You who Lord Brahma is, right? Yeah? Who's Lord Brahma? Okay, good. And you know what moha means? Take the microphone from him.
No.
Moha means bewilderment. Moha. And moha means big bewilderment. And Leela is pastime. So Brahma, mohan Leela is Brahma becoming really bewildered. And the Brahma Vimohan Leela is when he stole the calves and cowherd boys and put them in the cave and all of that. You're familiar with that pastime, right? Yeah. Oh, after he offers his prayers, that's chapter 14. It begins chapter 15. I'm just getting the context. Chapter 15 begins where Krishna turned 6, because when he was 3 years and 4 months old, Krishna started taking care of calves. How old is this boy?
He'll turn 4 next month.
4 next month. So you're 3 years and 11 months. Pay attention. You're 3 years and 11 months old, right? No? You're almost 4 years old, right? So Krishna started taking care of calves when he was 3 years and 4 months. And he did that until he was 5. And then he graduated. He started taking care of cows. You've seen a full-grown cow, right? Cows are really big. Big. When he was 5, he was taking care of cows. We turned 6, turned 6. And that's where chapter 15 begins. There's several things that happen when he turned 6. It's kind of like a maturing in his Leela. Actually, it says, there are acharyas say, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, when Krishna was 3 years, 4 months, his development, both his mind, then the Leela, and his body, he was like 5 years old. In any case, when he turned 6, he took care of cows. And his relationship with Balaram shifted a little bit, because when they were younger, they were just like equals, friends. But then another rasa starts to evolve, and that's the older brother rasa. It's not matured yet, it's just starting. And when he comes back from the forest, because there's a description of what it's like every day, taking care of the cows, and it's like a sample of rice in the pot of rice. It's every day so many things happen, where they play this way, and they play that way, and they play this way, and they play that way. And they're just having a blast. And then this event happens. They come near the Talavan forest. Some of the boys suggest that they should go into the Talavan forest and get the tal fruits. There's only one problem. Dhenukasura is there, keeping everybody out. And there's a verse in the Bhagavatam that says, he's so mean that when people would go there to pick the tal fruits, he sometimes would eat them. Now, normally donkeys don't eat people, but he was, not just a regular donkey. He was very, very cruel and very envious. So Balaram, there's a whole pastime in chapter 15. Balaram kills Dhenukasura. All of Dhenukasura's buddies also in the shape of donkeys, come charging at Krishna and Balaram and the cowherd boys, and they're all finished. And where we are in this chapter is the boys celebrate, yay! So now they're heading back to the village at the end of the day of taking care of the cows. And as they are heading back, they're singing the glories of Krishna. Not only this particular pastime, but the glories of Krishna. And the scene of what happens when Krishna comes back, because when he was taking care of calves, at least initially, the arrangement that Nanda Maharaj required is, you can take care of the calves, but you have to come back for lunch. Now the stealing of the cowherd boys and the calves was exceptional. That particular day, Krishna said, he just gave the instruction, bring your lunch with you. And that's what happened. They brought their lunch, and when that 1 year passed, the boys just sitting there having lunch. Anyway, and 1 year had passed. So now he's 6. And so it's their first full day out. And when they come back at the end of the day, the residents of the village, so there's different rasas, parental affection, but it's just starting. Now remember, he's 6, but his psychology or his mood and his development is like that, close to a 9-10-year-old boy. And so there's different rasas being stimulated, including the young gopis. When they see him and he glances at them and all of that, it's just beginning. There isn't description before chapter 15 about cowherd boys, the cowherd girls, the gopis, and Krishna and their loving exchanges. It starts here. So that's where we are. Krishna's returning. The boys are singing and dancing and celebrating Krishna's wonderful pastimes. When the adults hear the boys singing Krishna's pastimes, they smile, they hear everything, and they compose their own songs. And they sing the glories of Krishna. Not just Nanda and Yasoda, the whole of Braja, they're absorbed in Krishna. So here's the verse, and I'm going to go back a little bit. The verse, this is 10:15:43. 10:15:43. With their bee-like eyes, the women of Vrindavan drank the honey of the beautiful face of Lord Mukunda, and thus they gave up the distress they had felt during the day because of separation from him. The young Vrindavan ladies cast sidelong glances at the Lord, glances filled with bashfulness, laughter, and submission. And Sri Krishna, completely accepting these glances as proper offering of respect, entered the cowherd village. Purport. This is the BBT purport. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada describes this incident as follows, quote, all the gopis of Vrindavan remained very morose on account of Krishna's absence. All day they were thinking of Krishna in the forest, or of him herding cows in the pasture. When they saw Krishna returning, all their anxieties were immediately relieved, and they began to look at his face the way drones hover over the honey of the lotus flower. When Krishna entered the village, the young gopis smiled and laughed. Krishna, while playing the flute, enjoyed the beautiful smiling faces of the gopis, unquote. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is the supreme master of romantic skills, and thus he expertly exchanged loving feelings with the young cowherd girls of Vrindavan. When a chaste young girl is in love, she glances at her beloved with shyness, jubilation, and submission. When the beloved accepts her offering of love by receiving her glance and is thus satisfied with her, the loving young girl's heart becomes filled with happiness. These were exactly the romantic exchanges taking place between the beautiful young Krishna and the loving cowherd girls of Vrindavan. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. It's a long one. What did the gopis do when they approached Krishna? This verse answers. They drank with their eyes, in the form of bees, the honey of Mukunda's face. The gopis, who were not seen by Krishna, did not just glance upon him, but with full open eyes stared at him when no one was looking. Then, in a moment, when they caught Krishna's attention, those gopis broke into smiles out of joy. Then, out of bashfulness, they stopped their open eyes and smiles by covering their mouths with their left hands and pulling their veil over their eyes. This showed a sense of submission, vinaya, on their part. In this way, Krishna became aware of the great sweetness of the gopis' love. He took their gazing as an offering, tat satkriti, accepting those glances, some adigamya, with complete relish. Because he is the most clever at loving affairs, he entered the village. Paragraph. In two actions of offering and accepting and the bashful smiling, etc., there is a meaning. Their offering of respect was their bashful laughing and submission. His acceptance of that offering that had to be tasted is indicated by his releasing glances. In response to the gopis' offering of bashful laughing and gazing, Krishna responded by acceptance with glances towards them. Paragraph. One can elaborate the scene as follows. Taking the flower of their glances, now that becomes really poetic, taking the flower of their glances offered by their servants, called the sanchari bhav of enthusiasm in the hands of their eyes, and the taking the flower of their smiles offered by servants called sanchari bhav of joy. So it's poetic, but it takes a little bit of understanding of the terminology. Sanchari bhava means steady ecstasy. And there's a preliminary to steady ecstasy, and that's ecstasy that's not steady yet. Here's nectar devotion. In Bhakti, Chaitanya Charitamrita reads, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 33 such destructive symptoms of ecstasy are mentioned. They are expressed in words and in the eyebrows and in the eyes. These symptoms are called vyabhachari bhav, or destructive ecstasy. If they continue, they are sometimes called sanchari, or continued ecstasy. And from that section of Chaitanya Charitamrita, here's what TLC says. The Vyabhichari symptoms are 33 in number, and they primarily involve words uttered by the devotee and various bodily features. Different bodily features, such as dancing, trembling, and laughing, sometimes mix with the Vyabhichari symptoms, which are also called sanchari. So there's a preliminary, and then it becomes sustained or a steady ecstasy. So there's different categories of steady ecstasy. That's, Rupa Goswami teachings, because Rupa Goswami, you can say, described or had the realization that Krishna's pastimes are simply an ocean of rasa, or prema rasa. And prema rasa is like an ocean, has waves. And this wave mixes with that wave, makes a particular type of bhakti rasa. And then another wave mixing with another wave makes another kind of bhakti rasa. And Krishna's pastimes are simply bhakti rasa. In Jiva Goswami's language, so there's Rupa Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Now we're going to go to Jiva Goswami. Do you know who Jiva Goswami is? Jiva Goswami? You know who the 6 Goswamis of Vrndavana are? So he's one of those 6. He's younger. His Rupa and Sanatan are his uncles. His father is their brother. They are brothers of his father. So he's young. Jiva Goswami is young. And he learned everything in the science of bhakti from Rupa. And so he wrote books based on what he learned from Rupa Goswami. And one of those books is a commentary on the Bhagavatam, dealing with the 3 primary topics of the Bhagavatam. The 3 primary topics are Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. So in Priti Sandarbha, I was on the long flight, really long flight, to come here. I spent some time preparing for Balaram's appearance day, because tomorrow's Ekadasi, and Sunday is the Purnima, it's the appearance day of Balaram. So just getting absorbed in the appearance of Balaram, and specifically with this. So he's just killed, Balaram has just killed Denakasura. So here's what Jiva Goswami writes. He said that commonly the understanding of the purpose of the Lord's appearance is external. Pritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam. He kills the demons and protects the devotees, and he does those things. And then he quotes a nice verse from Canto 5, Chapter 19, Hanuman's prayers to Lord Ramachandra. Hanuman is in Jambudvip. Hanuman is both with Lord Ramachandra in Ayodhya, in the spiritual world, but Hanuman is in Jambudvip. There's a place in Jambudvip called Harivarsha, and so he's there with other associates singing the glories of Ram. And one of those songs of Ram says he accepts, there's a Sanskrit word means that he appears in this world in a human form, human-like form, not only to kill Ravana, but also to teach lessons. And the specific lesson referenced is you become overly attached to a male-female association, overly attached and you're going to have trouble. So he said, then he repeats, Jiva Goswami, this phrase means he has these two purposes, not just kill the demons, but he comes to teach lessons. And then he says, but those are merely external. The real reason is not an external reason, it's the internal reason. It's to expand the sweetness of his pastimes and give happiness to his pure devotees. And Queen Kunti says that. Some people say, there's a whole section in Kunti's prayers. You know who Queen Kunti is, right? So in chapter 8 of Canto 1, Queen Kunti is offering prayers and says, how does the unborn take birth? And some people say this reason, that reason, the other reason. And one of the reasons she extends, she said the real reason is you come to give happiness to your pure devotees. And that's the same, mind you, it's just Jiva Goswami weaving a tapestry. In the first canto of chapter 1 of the first canto, there's 6 questions. One of those questions is, why does the Lord appear? The answer that's given is to bring happiness to his pure devotees. So Jiva Goswami says the real reason that Krishna appears is to expand sweetness. And the sweetness is where all this language of rasa comes. The language of rasa like vyabhichari and sanchari and things that we don't hear so much. We hear about the pastimes, but then within the pastime is the sweetness with his devotees. So they deal with Dhanuka and all of his buddies, and now they're going back to Braja and they're dealing in sweetness with the residents of Braja, with the devotees. And they're giving liberation to everybody. But the real liberation is not just you don't take birth again. Real liberation is the sweetness of loving exchange. So Krishna appears to expand the sweetness of his loving exchange. And so all this terminology, there's the sanchari bhava of enthusiasm, and there's the sanchari bhava of joy. And so this is the poet, Vishwanath, saying when Krishna's coming back and the gopis have their glances and they smile and they cover their faces, they're making offerings of respect. But the respect is not just their palms folded. This is very sweet. And they're making offerings with their eyes. And they're making offerings with their smile. And they're making offerings with their shyness. And that's it's a sanchari bhav. And it doesn't stop. It keeps, the waves keep moving and growing and mixing with other waves. And that's what Krishna does. He expands his sweetness. Reading the pastime without the assistance of Rupa Goswami and those that are followers of Rupa Goswami, it can just go right past us. But reading these commentaries, it's so lovely. So, taking the flower of their glances offered by their servants, called the sanchari bhava of enthusiasm, in the hands of their eyes, and taking the flower of their smiles offered by servants called the sanchari bhava of joy in their hands, made of their delicate lips, they approach Krishna saying, take these two things, all that we have in our house. When, in order to accept the gifts, Krishna engaged his servant in the form of his glance. His crafty glance became eager to steal the gifts which were previously held within the gopis' houses. Therefore, Krishna withdrew his glance to himself. When the gopis revealed these gifts, then the glance of Krishna freed itself with great vigor, like a warrior, quickly approaching the gopis and began to steal the two gifts. But then their friend, in the form of bashfulness, who has the ability to cover things, appeared and began to hide the two gifts. As a fight broke out between them, the associate of the gopis, called Vinaya or submission, arrived. But Krishna's servant, in the form of his glance, forcibly took the gift of the gopis' glance, along with both bashfulness and submission, and offered them to Krishna. Very beautiful poetry, huh? Krishna received these three like a great valuable jewel and placed them with care in the center of his temple in the form of his heart. This is the implication of the word satkara, or offering. Although bashfulness and other words have their own power of implication, because satkara and moksha have such great implications, they have been explained here in detail. Paragraph. Another meaning is as follows. The young women of Braja gave up the pain they experienced during the day. He accepted with respect, satkara, their shy glances, which were like bashfully controlled smiles, and entered the village. Now, Vishwanath is a very precise and very rasika commentator. When you read Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's writings, just be prepared for anything, because it's very, 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 very deep and scholarly, and it's filled with rasa. He moves in that world, always. Sometimes very precise, like a scholar is. It's sometimes very sweet, like a poet is. And that's with him. Both are with him all the time. Vishwanath. He writes something similar, the language, I won't read it. It's the same thing expressed in more elaborate language. Here's this last paragraph. A Shakti in the form of bashfulness, who has the power to cover things, suddenly appeared and hid the two gifts. Then another Shakti named Vinaya or submission arrived, and a fight broke out between them. Bashfulness and submission. Kind of like stop and go. And a fight broke out. Anyway, Jiva Goswami writes, the scene is further described. The gopis are here described as the women of Vraja. Mukunda here signifies that he would deliver them from all suffering. They drank the honey of his lotus face, filled with fragrance, with eyes which were like drinking vessels, bringai, and by this they removed the longing arising from separation from him during the day. They removed the longing caused by separation at night by seeing him in the morning. They released glances filled with submission, smiling, and shyness. Recognizing their respect, he entered his house within the village. And Sanatana Goswami writes, by the sweetness of seeing him, their pain of separation was relieved. That is described here. They drank the face of Mukunda, who gives liberation. Liberation, however, is condemned because the joy of Krishna is so much greater. His face also gives that superior bliss. Or, Mukunda means he who has teeth in his mouth. This indicates the beauty of his face with red lips. They drank the honey, Saragram, of his face with their bee-like eyes. This means they directly gazed at him with great attachment. Though bees drink honey, their eyes desire to drink. The previous verse mentioned their desire to drink. Their eyes were also like bees in being fickle. This produced a special beauty. It is suggested that their eyes constantly gazed here and there at his face and limbs. On this particular day, the women of Vraja particularly felt pain of separation. In the night, there was no pain of separation, for they could see him at Nanda's house. Or they relived their pain in the day, but at the end of the day, Krishna entered the house, and at night they could not see him perfectly. He accepted their welcome of seeing his face and coming with affection, or a welcome with singing and pleasing words, as well as giving gifts. He respected them with love. Thus they showed shyness and humility without fickleness, rather than lowering their heads out of humility. Thus he freed himself from glancing at them because he entered his house. And then another writing of Jiva Goswami again. Jiva Goswami, the younger nephew of Rupa and Sanatan, and wrote many books. So one of those books he wrote was Gopal Champu. Gopal Champu is a retelling of Krishna's Braja Leela. And the circumstance is this. Krishna promised the residents of Vrindavan, particularly he promised the gopis, that he would return. He finally returned. He returned something like 96 years later, 98 years later. More than that. Anyway, he returned after he killed Dantavakra, because that business was their killing of the demons. Krishna was thinking, if I go to Vrindavan, then the remaining demons will know I have affection for the Vrindavan residents, so they'll go there and harass them. So I have to kill the demons first, because otherwise the residents of Vrindavan will be harassed by demons. So when he killed Dantavakra, that was it, demons finished. Krishna went to Vrindavan. It's not described in Bhagavatam. It is described in Padma Purana, and consistently our acharyas say he went to Vrindavan for 2 months. And during those 2 months, one of the things that happened, according to Gopal Champu, is Krishna is with Nanda and Jasoda. He's again looking like a young boy, 16. Young man, 16. And Narada Muni has 2 disciples named Snigdakanta and Madhukanta, and they're gifted, like Valmiki was gifted, of knowing Ram's pastimes. So they're gifted by knowing Krishna's pastimes, including what everyone was feeling and what everybody did, even though they weren't there. They weren't eyewitnesses, but they knew by the empowerment that Narada gave them. And so every morning, the residents of Vrindavan, Yasoda, Nanda, Krishna, Radharani, everybody was there. And Snigdakanta and Madhukanta are telling Krishna's pastimes. They retell his pastimes from childhood until he leaves for Mathura. So that's what Gopal Champa is. There's other things, but that's the basic context. So one of the pastimes being narrated is what happened after the killing of Dhenukasura. And Krishna comes back to the village. So Gopal Champu, chapter 15, starting with text 175. In this way, with great difficulty, they passed their days absorbed in confusion of desires. On the day that the people of Vraja excitedly praised the killing of Dhenukasura, the doe-eyed women attained a pleasant meeting with their lover. Though the women were his eternal lovers, who had forgotten their identity in this birth, his beauty made them recollect the truth, and they forgot about fear of trespassing dharma. Now, the nature of Champu, I don't know the details, but there's different elements to a Champu. Sometimes it's just like narration, prose narration. Sometimes it's poetry, verses and verses and verses and verses, and then going back to prose narration. Sometimes it's making scriptural reference. That's kind of the thread that pulls everything along. So here he makes a reference to chapter 15, verse 43, which is our verse. With their bee-like eyes, the women of Vrindavan drank the honey of the beautiful face of Lord Mukunda, and thus they gave up the distress they had felt during the day because of separation from him. The young Vrindavan ladies cast sidelong glances at the Lord, glances filled with bashfulness, laughter, and submission, and Sri Krishna, completely accepting these glances as a proper offering of respect, entered the cowherd village. Paragraph. Their eyes, acting like chakora birds and bees, drank the lotus nectar of Krishna's face with greed. He felt this to be the greatest honor. This was suitable for them since they had given their lives to him. Paragraph. They showered him with the arrows of their glances and entreated him with bashful smiling eyes. He took this as the highest honor. This is indeed the conduct of persons who have given their lives to him. Paragraph. Though the gopis released arrows with their eyes to hit Krishna, the sages say that this act of shooting arrows is bhakti and true worship. 177. Just as the wives of chakora birds are put in cages, the gopis were brought to their houses by the protectors of family morals, though they were not fully satisfied with drinking the beauty of his moon-like face. When they were reflected in the lake of the heart of Krishna, they appeared most remarkable, standing like pictures. They became most beautiful, like a gathering of glittering constellations, and Radha shone with beauty as if holding the moon within. Previously, when they saw him for a moment, their hearts became relieved. When they saw him repeatedly, they began thinking, "Ah, when will we drink the beauty of his face again?" When there's meeting, they're still anticipating separation. (178). The Sakis hid their feelings. "Oh, friend, I do not have any desire for any other man. My nature is such that on seeing any black object, I begin to tremble." Radha's body was afflicted with pain. Though she attained peace in her heart by meditation, she still remained agitated. Her Sakis immediately experienced her emotions and became afflicted similarly. Who will protect Radha? 179. They became weakened by dependence on the will of another. The gopis have the kind of affection for Radha that whatever is her mood, that's their mood. They were dependent on the will of another. They became weakened by dependence on the will of another, or they became strengthened by Radha's love. Paragraph. But their determination could not bring about the appearance of Krishna. What use are dreams and eyes when Radha and her friends are afflicted by separation? Like nectar to creepers when the moon arises, like nectar to creepers when the moon arises, by his appearance to the gopis, which produced various types of joy, youthfulness appeared in them. So that, this is just one verse. It's not finished yet. Tomorrow there's more on the same verse. So it's just the verse from Bhagavad Gita, Katayantas chamam nityam turshanti cha ramanti cha. Of course, according to consciousness, devotees will enjoy discussing topics of Krishna. And who knows what the joy was like for the 6 Goswamis discussing topics of Krishna. Here, they're sharing their tasting of topics of Krishna in the form of their writings with us. What was it like being in Vrindavan at the time of the 6 Goswamis? I mean, if there had been technology like this, make video recordings and but the essence can be achieved not just by a video recording. The essence can be achieved by submissive oral reception, heard from proper sources, and trying to assimilate not just the information that's being transmitted, but the mood of love that's being transmitted, the mood of the resident of Vrindavan. To enter into that mood of the residents of Vrindavan, it's a purification process. And the purification process the method is hearing, but then there's qualities of hearing. And the qualities of hearing depend so much upon a heart that has become pure. And there's degrees of purity. And there are degrees of orientation of the heart towards the object. And by associating with our acharyas, of course, this section is a section that Prabhupada had left this world. His pastimes ended with the end of chapter 13. So it leaves us with the BBT commentaries that take from the previous acharyas and the previous acharyas. And our previous acharyas, especially are stimulating, they're tasting, and therefore, because they're tasting, they're passing on this Braja Prem, the kind that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave. I'm mentioning that because just before coming here, I was in Atlanta. It's a long plane ride to go from Atlanta to California. And in anticipation of Balaram's appearance day, there was I was asked to give 2 classes to a big group of Zoom people. I mean, I don't even know how many people were on the Zoom call. So I chose to speak on Balaram's killing of Dhenuka and Balaram's killing of Pralamba. And in Garga Samhita is another literature that Gaudiya Vaishnavas like. And Garga Samhita, it says that the reason that Balaram killed Dhenuka, not Krishna, is because Prahlad Maharaj was promised by Lord Nrsingadev that he won't kill any of your descendants. And Dhenuka, in his previous life, was the son of Bali Maharaj. Sahasika, the son of Bali Maharaj. And Bali Maharaj was son of Virocha, and Virocha was the son of Prahlad. So in his previous life, he was in the line of Prahlad. So he said he had Balaram kill him. And so there was a question. The question was, wait a minute, why was it that Balaram killed Dhenuka? Krishna had Balaram kill Dhenuka, but Krishna killed Putana. Because Putana, who was Putana in her previous life? She was the daughter of Bali Maharaj. Ratnamala, the daughter of Bali Maharaj. So he killed Putana, but he didn't kill Dhenuka. So there was discussion on that topic. It can be kind of like information, just like esoteric parsing of what's the reason behind it and all those things. So one of the persons had read a commentary by one of the persons in Vallabhacharya's line. Some of you have been to Vrindavan. May you one day go to Vrindavan. Have you been to Vrindavan? Really? Did you go to Govardhan Hill? Yes? Did you circumambulate around Govardhan Hill? Do you remember? How old were you then? 8 years old. Do you remember after going around all the very, very bottom of Govardhan Hill, you start going up on the western side of Govardhan Hill. You come to another place where it's the tongue of Govardhan, and there's all these Gujarati people offering milk to the tongue of Govardhan. Do you remember that? On the right-hand side, as you're going along, and there's a big scene. It's big, 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 big commotion thing. So that's the place where Vallabha Acharya's followers stay in Vrindavan. And it's very near to the backside of the Gopal temple. The Gopal temple. Gopal, the deity that Madhavendra Puri found and placed up on Govardhan Hill. Madhavendra Puri found the deity of Gopal. You know that story? No. Madhavendra Puri was the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master. Madhavendra Puri was the spiritual master of Ishwar Puri, who was the disciple of Lord Chaitanya. Who was the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya. So Madhavendra Puri, in the course of his traveling as a sannyasi, was in Vrindavan. And he had been fasting for days. And Krishna came, disguised like a cowherd, a village boy. He gave him some milk. Remember that story? You remember that story. Krishna gave him some milk. And then he realized that was Krishna. And at night, that same Krishna appeared in a dream and said, I gave you that milk and I'm Krishna, and my deity form is over by the side of Govardhan Hill. Please find me and begin my worship. I've been waiting for you. So in the morning he went and found the deity and installed the deity and Abhishek and everything, big festival for a month. You know the story? Yeah, okay. So after some time, the deity of Gopal was placed on top of Govardhan Hill. And here's how the story goes. The followers of Madhavendra Puri worshipped that deity, but they had no sons. So Raghunath Das Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis, had great affection for Vallabhacharya's son, whose name was Vittal. And Vittal was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, so he entrusted the worship of Gopal, Madhavendra Puri, his disciples. Vittal became in charge of the worship of Gopal, and he had become a great follower of Lord Chaitanya. But as fate would have it, in the course of time, there was dissension between Vallabha followers and the Bengalis. That's a long story, but eventually the Bengalis, the followers of Vallabhacharya, took charge of Gopal's worship. And it's very near to that place where the tongue of Govardhan, and there's a village. So in one of the acharyas in the line of Vallabhacharya, one of the commentators on the Bhagavatam in the line of Vallabhacharya wrote a commentary on the Bhagavatam. And his explanation is different. His explanation is, when Krishna came to the place where Dhenuka was residing in the tal forest, he had assumed the form of a donkey. In Ramachandra's Leela, one of the demons that Ramachandra killed was Kara. And Kara means the same, donkey or ass. One of Ravana's brothers' name was Kara. Imagine mother and father calling their son donkey. But that was his name, Kara. And Ram killed him. So his commentary says, the reason Krishna wanted Balaram to kill him because he's Rama. Rama killed Dhenuka to keep the consistency of the Leela of the previous appearance of Krishna as Lord Ramachandra. That's what he writes. And it's it's nice. But the the sweetness, how the sweetness of the pastimes of Krishna, like we just read, taking the terminology of Rupa Goswami, Vyavichari Bhava and Sanchari Bhava, and we're going to hear tomorrow Alambana and Anuraga. All these are descriptions of the sweetness, the bhakti rasa, Sindhu, the ocean of bhakti rasa, and how this and that and the other are different waves of ecstasies, and this ecstasy mixes with that ecstasy and produces this emotion and that emotion, and everyone just being tossed by the waves of the ocean, floating in the waves of the ocean of Krishna's pastimes. The essence, according to our acharyas, is it's the sweetness of Krishna. There's incidental or secondary reasons, as killing of demons and protecting the devotees, and all that's nice too. Not like, put it in the garbage can. That's one of the primary purposes. But they're external. Then there's internal. Internal means what Krishna is feeling. And what Krishna is feeling is reciprocating with the love of his devotees. So this particular verse, which will continue tomorrow, I think, is the eternal associates of Krishna have taken their birth to participate with Krishna in his childhood pastimes in Braja. And there's some others that have the good fortune of also becoming perfected souls and taking birth in Braja and becoming apprentices in Krishna's pastimes and being trained and experiencing directly. So to be eligible for that requires a very strong desire. It requires purity, but it requires a very strong desire, an intense desire. Not just like cross your fingers and hope you'll go to a good place after this life. It's intense desire to be situated in a loving relationship with Krishna, like these residents in Vrindavan. That's the teaching that Rupa Goswami imparted. It was received and understood and realized by Rupa Goswami and passed on to others. And we're in that line. Somehow or other, we got that good fortune. So hearing these activities is part of that process of stimulations of ecstatic love for Krishna. It's a great fortune. I mean, there's details and all of that's interesting, but the good fortune is the stimulation of that ecstatic love for Krishna. And the whole of the Bhagavatam is meant for that purpose. There are different parts. It's fascinating, all the different parts. You too want to hear the universal or Vedic cosmology. That's another part of the big picture. The Bhagavatam is wonderful. Yeah. Do we have a microphone for people that are online? They can hear.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, on Putna and Bali Maharaj, you mentioned that what I learned is that Bali Maharaj is next in line to become Lord Brahma. And
I don't know. I haven't heard that.
Oh,
I haven't heard that.
okay. Because,
I would like to see the pramana that says that, not just I heard it in a class somewhere or read it somewhere.
okay.
Before we go forward with it, and
Okay.
ask a question based on that, I'd like to see the pramana.
Okay.
You show me the pramana.
Okay. So, Maharaj, the next thing is, since Bali Maharaj submitted himself to Vamana Dev, it is also understood that the good karmas of the parents go down to the children, and also upwards to, you know. So
Ancestors.
how did then Putna became Putna? I mean, in her.
How did she become?
I mean, she didn't get the benefits of Bali Maharaj's.
Oh, yes, she did. How do you say that? She didn't. She was a mix, as Ratnamala was a mix. When Ratnamala saw Vamana, she went, "Oh, I wish the day would come when I could have him as my son." And that's the Prahlad affection for the Lord.
Okay, and that's how she was, able to.
Well, she got, but she also, when she saw Bali being tied up, she became angry. I'd like to kill him.
Okay, that's how she became
That's
Putna.
how.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
And Maharaj, one more question,
Yeah.
if I may ask, is Maharaj, you talked about intense desire, developing intense desire to be rightly situated and to go back to Godhead. I mean, so how challenges in these time and circumstances that we are in, how do we develop that intense desire?
By following Rupa Goswami. It's not a fairy tale. It's not teasing. It's, here's something that's really nice and you can't have it. Like holding some candy out to a child and then snatching it away. You can't have it. It's not like that. It's meant for us. As in Bhagavad Gita, you just add another section to Bhagavad Gita. Manushyanam sahasreshu kasya jatati siddhaye. Out of many thousands of persons, maybe there's one endeavoring perfection. And of those who achieve perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. And of those who know Krishna in truth, there's hardly one that has this intense desire. It's very rare. Chapter 1 of Nectar Devotion. It's very rare. Prema is very rare. It's one of the characteristics of prema. So, to get something that's very rare, you have to pay a price. Very valuable. What's the price? It's eagerness. Or stronger, greed. So how do you get it? It's your question. Follow Rupa Goswami. Squeaky clean. And just continue with faith and keep following and following. Become pure and become eligible. And we're not there yet because we're not so qualified because we have so many other things going on. But the eligibility, the availability for that eligibility is to everybody.
Maharaj, where can I read and learn more about Rupa Goswami?
Can you? Of course you can.
And what reference?
There's so many. I have been, it's something that I've been spending during the Festival of the Holy Name, there were two main topics. Well, two main personalities, Rupa Goswami and Balaram. You can listen, you'll find. Coming up is our virtual Vrndavana Yatra I plan to spend a whole class just on Rupa Goswami, and it's going to go in more detail from multiple sources. It's you can't do everything in one class. Write a book about Rupa Goswami, but there's lots of material, lots of biographical material in different places.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Something that for me that's really outstanding is twice Lord Chaitanya confirmed, yes, it's true. I gave him the fullness of my mercy. And how much mercy is that? Mahavadanyaya, he downloaded everything to Rupa Goswami. Everything. To realize everything that he had and gave, and to be able to write it. He was, high voltage. But, at the same time, very sweet. Yeah. So you just touch high voltage and you get a shock. Including, anything. But particularly bhakti rasa. And he was absolutely humble. Humble to the degree that Lord Chaitanya, when Lord Chaitanya first met Rupa and Sanatan, it was in Ramakeli, their humility was profound. When he got back to Puri, he was speaking to others about how he was moved by their humility. So not only they're way up there, they're way down there. In terms of their estimation of themselves. And it wasn't cosmetic, it was their feeling. Become a follower of Rupa Goswami and that eligibility is yours. It's mine. I mean, everyone. Raghunath Das Goswami wrote a verse, in many verses, but one of them was, with a straw in my teeth, I simply beg that birth after birth I may receive dust from the feet of Rupa Goswami. That's come to that stage, and the eligibility is yours. Yeah, that's a very advanced stage. We're not there.
So, Maharaj, the challenge is, so there is a contradiction here. What I've heard is, one is, what I've heard is you simply chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, go back to Godhead. The other part you just mentioned is that
there's a quality of chanting.
Yes.
The process is simple. It's just that. And then you start unpacking.
And then you mentioned about the intense desire is a lot of sacrifice and a lot of pain before you get that. So
don't be lazy. Don't. Oh, I was told that it was easy and now it's not easy. It's qualitative. It's not a tease or deception. It's just chant. It's very simple. And there's a qualitative just chant. Just chant. And not all the other, hullabaloo. Anything else? Give the microphone to somebody else.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, please accept my obeisances. Thank you so much for the long journey and for coming out here. It was so nice to hear these poetic commentaries,
Isn't it?
on this
It's
verse.
so sweet.
It's so sweet. And what really surprised or stood out for me was from these commentaries, you understand that they really understand the verse and the bhava that's being exchanged. And on the one hand, we think we'll never be able to understand that or have a glimpse. And on the other hand, when I read these or listen to these poetic commentaries, our mind can think, oh, maybe we've actually experienced just a glimmer of this kind of separation and the feelings that could be experienced. And my question is should we feel more like the former than the latter, that we can never really understand or these poetic commentaries and these feelings? Or because I know in this material world, any feelings we have are really like a perverted reflection.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when we experience relationships that are of a more spiritual nature, we feel like, oh, maybe I get a glimmer of that.
Yeah. That's so. On the one hand, and on the other hand, it's the humility, truthful humility, not painted humility, truthful humility. And on the other hand is the aspiration, again, yearning or hankering. And the hankering gives you, even in Abbas, even in the reflection, Rupa Goswami discusses this. Even in the Abbas, it's just an Abbas, but it's a happiness that's far beyond anything that's of this material world kind of, experiences of exchanges between people or between people and their pets or something like that. Because people get really attached to their pets. But it's nothing like, Krishna and the cows. It's nothing like it. Nothing like it. Or all the other things that came in the beginning of this chapter. He's sending the forest animals and the bushes and the creepers and the grass and the trees in ecstasy. Just by playing his flute or by speaking about them or by touching their leaves or placing his, it's nothing. So you can get a sense it's beyond my reach because I'm in this covered condition. But even the glimpse tells us something. If it just remains poetry and it doesn't, because poetry, one of the 26 qualities of a devotee is poetic, kavi. And it's explained that in order to express something that's beyond our experience, you have to use poetry. It's, metaphor and simile. And therefore, the literature of a poet is ornamental. It's called alankar. It's an ornament where, whatever it is, that expression, the moon and the branches of the tree. The moon is not in the branches of a tree, but it gives you a directional sense of all of the, so it's expressing in poetic language something that's beyond our experience. But even that poetic language is beyond our experience. It stimulates the feeling. And it's just a shadow feeling. What to speak of the shadow of the shadow of the shadow? And thinking that's nice. So, it's your question is A or B, and it's both. Because experiencing the shadow tells you there's a real thing, and I want the real thing. That shadow is so much nicer, that the shadow of the real thing is so much nicer than the darkness of ignorance. I want the real thing. And so when that wanting of the real thing becomes more pure and singularly focused, then one still moves through this temporary world, but the focus gets sharper and sharper. And that's our life. So back to your question, is both. And what do? We go on the hearing. In the morning class, it's been discussing Uddhava Gita. And Krishna's telling Uddhava, it doesn't even start devotional service until it gets to chapter 11. He covers 4.5 chapters where he even touches bhakti. When he touches bhakti, he says, he explains what bhakti is pure. But then he says, supposing one isn't there, then he gives a recommendation. Do your work without attachment to the results and offer the results to me, and 2, hear about me. Because the hearing will purify the mind. That's like a filter that's not allowing you to see Krishna. You're seeing filtered. But so hearing and this detached work, working where the detached work means the fruits are offered to Krishna. Those two purify the mind, and then you can see me directly and experience me directly. That's Shuddha Bhakti. And if you're not there, you do these other things to get there. So why would you do these other things? There has to be some faith. It's going to bring me. But that faith needs to not be stagnant or stale. It needs to be dynamic and grow and grow and grow, and in association of devotees that are moving in that direction, or they're there and they're just sharing. So it's both. I'm way down here, I'm not so qualified. Yet there is a reality. And I want that reality to be more vibrant in my life. And then you keep moving with that. So it's both.
When you were reading the poetic commentaries, I was thinking, if I could actually understand that the sidelong glance is an offering, and if I could actually understand that, I feel like I would just be in a puddle of tears. It just seems like such deep emotions. It's like, how could you even read through the scriptures if you really understand what's being exchanged in these pastimes?
And he's able to say, here's another meaning and here's another meaning. Meaning, in other words, there's different audiences. And at the scholarly side, it's not just the poetic, it's there's different ways of seeing this, and the different ways of realizing has everything to do with one's faith and one's capacity to relish the pastimes of Krishna. So you can be taken in different ways. I mean, our acharyas are really merciful. Wonderful. Okay. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for coming all the way to give your association. Maharaj, when we hear Bhagavatam or study Bhagavatam, there is one thing called appreciation, the other thing called application. So where do those two fit in together? So application itself is not good, right?
Say it again. Which is not good?
The application only. I need to take something from the lesson, because there has to be a mix of
You
appreciation.
have a lot of focus on application. Your communications are very much like that. I've noticed. And it's not, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing incomplete with that, because in order to be consistent with application, there has to be appreciation. You know, the heart has to be there in order to be consistent with application. Otherwise, you won't be consistent with application if the heart's not there. And if the heart is there, then you're going to apply. So they go together. One helps the other, and the other helps the one. They go together. And you know, for whatever the reason, maybe it's, the teacher that you've been exposed to has assisted you, particularly with application, and there's a reason why. My comment is that devotees don't often apply. And so a teacher that is encouraging their student to apply, good, because we know lots of things and we don't do those things we know. And when you act in knowledge, it brings realization. That's teaching. When you act in knowledge, it brings realization. So emphasizing application, fantastic. But to sustain it, it has to be at the heart level. No, that's in faith, but it's also realization and appreciation. So don't be cautious about being over analytical. Okay. Anything else? Do we have anything online? No? Okay. You have something more? No? Okay. Yes, you have something.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. I would like to thank you so much, Maharaj, for coming all the way, giving us your association in such troubled times all over the world. This during the pandemic, you're taking so much risk for coming and giving us your association. We are very thankful to you, Maharaj.
That's it?
That's it, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Yeah.